As I was recovering in the hospital, my brother came to see me, and he had taken his first LSD experience, and this was November, late October, November 1966. So my motorcycle wreck happened the day before Halloween 1966, and my brother came to visit me probably 2 days later, and I was mad at him because he was giggling, and he didn't give my motorcycle wreck enough somber thought. So I asked him what was going on, and he said that he had taken LSD. Now, I had been reading about Tim Leary and Richard Alpert, and these two Harvard professors who were advocating the use of LSD, and it was fascinating to me. So I asked him what it was like, and he said it's like nothing. He said it's not like alcohol, it's not like marijuana, it's not like benzadrine. It's a completely different experience. So I became fascinated by the thought of psychedelic drugs.
Growing up in the 80s, unfortunately, my generation was more of the crack meth generation. And your generation growing up in the 60s, as an adult in the 60s, it was more psychedelics. And for some reason, it feels like, drugs are drugs. I'm not advocating that at all. But it seems like you guys had a more pure sense of why you were doing this. You were looking more for spiritual enlightenment through drugs as opposed to just getting high. Can you just kind of walk me through what a psychedelic experience is like? Like, what part of your brain does it open up where you actually do feel some sort of enlightenment?
Apparently, the psychedelic experience is different for different people.
Okay.
When I was taking it, I thought everybody was having the same kind of experience as I was.
Okay.
And once again, I moved in that circle of people who were taking psychedelics for, if not enlightenment, at least to expand their consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
And many of us, before we took our first LSD experiences, read about it. And we read the work that had been done, and psychedelic drugs were used with terminally ill patients, and it seemed to help them with their fear of death, the death anxiety that they were experiencing. After a LSD experience, they weren't so scared anymore.
Really?
Yeah.
So it kind of gave them a look into the next world?
It kind of did, I think.
Wow.
Yeah. So I was going into it with that point of view, because I knew what it felt like to get high, and I knew what it felt like to get drunk, and I knew there was something more.
So what kind of drugs did you experiment with before LSD? Like you mentioned benzadrine in the first chapter. Is that an upper or?
Yeah, benzadrine was an upper, and I think basically my basic drug of choice was alcohol.
Okay. Okay.
And I started drinking alcohol. I was fascinated by alcohol when I was a little kid. Mm-hmm. I actually, when I was a little kid, I wanted to grow up and be an alcoholic.
Are you serious? How old were you?
Well, 3 or 4.
And you wanted to be an alcoholic?
Yeah.
Where does that even come from?
I did. Well, I didn't want to be addicted to anything. I didn't want to be addicted to alcohol. But I was fascinated by cocktail lounges when I was a little kid.
But how did you even get exposed to those at 3 or 4?
My parents were, every time, I wouldn't have to even be exposed. I just was fascinated by them. They were like magnets to me.
Wow.
We lived in Long Beach, California, and I used to hang out at a place called the Pike when I was a kid. It was a big amusement park. But there were bars and cocktail lounges there, and when I was a kid, I would just peek inside, and I'd see how dark and cool it was in there, and I just knew that people were having fun, and I knew that that's what I wanted to do. Now, I didn't want to experience the negative consequences that alcoholics experience, and I didn't want my life to go down the toilet. and I didn't want to become addicted, but I wanted to live that kind of a lifestyle,
Okay.
you know. So drinking came very naturally and very quickly. Started drinking in the Army, but shortly after I got out of the Army, I was interested in music, in blues and jazz, and I'd go to clubs in LA and Santa Ana, and everybody was smoking marijuana in the clubs. And now we're talking 1964,
Okay.
this area of time. So I got off. I never smoked cigarettes. Never smoked a cigarette in my whole life. But as soon as somebody handed me a joint, I took it. Because I knew that the jazz musicians and the blues musicians smoked marijuana, and I'd heard that it helped them with their music, and they could hear music better, and it enhanced their performances.
No
So I
inhibition
thought.
whatsoever. You just
No, I just grabbed it and took it. I wasn't
Wow.
afraid of it or anything.
okay.
And so then I added marijuana to my alcohol, and it also was interesting because the alcohol lowered my inhibitions and impaired my judgment, and the marijuana somehow put that back in balance a little
Oh.
bit. Yeah, if I don't understand how that works. But I worked in a factory in Santa Ana, and there were people in the factory who were using speed. And so I heard about benzadrine. It was a form of speed that came in white tablets, and we used to call them white crosses because they were sectioned off into 4 segments, and you could break them in half. They were so strong that you could take half of one and it'd keep you up all night. So I started using benzadrine, and I felt really high taking it. And it enhanced my drinking because I could drink longer if I was on speed. So I wasn't so tired and sleepy, because alcohol, as we know, is a
I
depressant,
see. Okay.
and speed is a stimulant. So the stimulant effect would overcome the depressant effect of the alcohol. And so those were my drugs of choice before I took LSD, was alcohol and benzadrine and marijuana.
I see. Okay.